everyone. So today we're looking at 3.1 Introduction to Culture. So a tidbit of the day is that in 2013 there was a mermaid documentary that played on Animal Planet, and it fooled so many people that the government had to issue a statement that mermaids were not real. Our learning objective for today is to define the characteristics, attitudes, and traits that influence geographers when they study culture. Starting out with culture, this is the beliefs, the values, practices, behaviors, and technologies shared by a society and passed down through generations. It includes things like clothing, literature, food, music, attitudes, values, educational ideas, government systems, all kinds of stuff. So the first thing we're going to look at is cultural traits. And we essentially have two parts of culture. We have the material side, and then we have the attitudes and practices. On the material side, this is the tangible stuff. So things like food, architecture, clothing, literature, anything that we could touch, technology, all of that good stuff. The attitudes and practices are the beliefs, the religion, the holidays and festivals, the activities that most people do, like having a cup of coffee in the morning or sitting down to have a blessing over a meal. And then common attitudes, like the idea of equality or a certain group being in power over another. Any of those common ideas or attitudes. So there are three big pieces when we're thinking about cultural traits. This is kind of where we split the material culture and the attitudes and beliefs. So the first thing is artifacts. Artifacts are anything that we can touch. So visible, tangible objects of culture. Buildings, clothing, tools, toys, even land use practices, but that physical stuff. And these change readily. What we use land for changes very quickly and easily from one year to the next year. Think about putting up a shopping center or houses or any of that, or how quickly we go through technology or clothing trends. Some of these are basic necessities, the stuff we use all of the time. Some of them are used for practices, and some of them are used for recreation, like toys. So it really just depends. Then we get into sociofacts, and we're thinking social stuff. These are the structures and organizations that of the society that influence social behavior. So things like our family systems, who do you live with, and that varies by culture, your government, your educational systems, and religious organizations, things like that. These are much slower to change, and they define the ways that people act and react around others, and they establish rules that govern behavior. So in families, we generally learn to respect the parents or older generations. In education, we learn to sit and be quiet a lot of the time when other people are talking, or raising our hands when we have a question. And then finally we have mentafacts, and think of this as the mental stuff, so mental. These are the central enduring elements of culture that reflect shared ideas, values, knowledge, and beliefs. Stuff like religious beliefs and language, and these are the slowest to change. So artifacts very fast, sociofacts slower, mentafacts much slower. We have two types of culture. We have folk culture, which is practiced by small, homogeneous groups in isolated rural areas. So groups that are largely the same and fairly isolated, not being influenced by that outside popular culture. Popular culture is practiced by large, heterogeneous groups that share certain habits despite being different. So think about things that all Americans do, or most Americans do, no matter how different otherwise they may be. Again, many of us have a cup of coffee in the morning. We might sit down to dinner with our families, or dinner is the big meal. We go to school every day, things like that. Then we have this idea of cultural mixing, and we often see this as acculturation. So when our cultures interact with each other, they may tend to take on traits or characteristics of others and combine to create something new. So if we look down here, we see monks, and they're playing basketball. Monks are part of folk culture, but basketball is obviously popular culture. So they've combined. So we're going to look at some aspects of culture. So the first one is habit. Habit is a repetitive act of a person. So when I wake up in the first 5 minutes, one of the things that I do is go and feed my pets. And that's a habit for me. Other people may have other things that they do first thing. Habit may be what I make sure I grab before I walk out the door, anything like that. A custom is a repetitive act of a group. So we go into public and we wear clothing. We stand up and put our hands over our hearts when the Pledge of Allegiance happens or when they play the national anthem. Those are customs. We shake hands when we meet someone new. That's a custom. Then we have taboo. A taboo is a restriction on behavior imposed by social customs. So things that you don't do because it's not okay by your society. For example, in the US, we don't tend to eat animals that we consider pets. And overall, we don't tend to eat predator meats. We don't kill people because it's a taboo. Not only is it illegal, but our society looks down upon people who kill other people. And then we have origin. This really is hearth. The word you want to know here is hearth. Every piece of culture starts somewhere. Every culture starts somewhere. And that starting place is the hearth, place where it originates. Popular culture comes from developed nations, so they may be influenced by other places, but when it's becoming popular, it's largely because it's coming from a developed nation. The United States, Britain, Japan, and South Korea have a really big market on a lot of the widespread aspects of popular culture. So cultural norms are standards that are shared and patterns that guide the behavior of a group. So again, the things that we do because our culture considers it normal. Do we open the door for someone? Where do we park? How do we cross the street? What is okay or not okay to say to new people? This may be tightly governed. Some societies require a very strong sense of conformity, or it may be more relaxed. And in countries with a lot of access to popular culture, it tends to be more relaxed. Lastly, we're going to look at some attitudes towards differences. So one is ethnocentrism. This is the idea that your ethnicity, your group, is central. So this is the tendency of ethnic groups to evaluate other groups according to preconceived notions originating in their own cultures. You judge people by what you know from your own culture. When this is more profound or extreme, it may include the belief that one's own culture is superior, which may result in overt or clear discrimination against other groups. This sometimes is a tendency we have in the United States, is to think that because we are more developed, because we are Americans, because whatever, our culture is better than others. And this isn't to say that everybody feels that way, but it's often a predominant idea. And then we have cultural relativism. This is saying that cultures are relative only to themselves, essentially. So this evaluation of a culture solely by its unique standards. You're not judging it based on anything else, you're only comparing it to itself. But critics will challenge the appropriateness of this idea because it may mean accepting extreme behaviors or practices such as human rights violations, which could be norms in that particular culture. All right, that's it. So we are looking to define the characteristics, attitudes, and traits that influence geographers when they study culture. And I want you to do 3 things in your notebooks. So identify and describe an example of a cultural trait that from your own culture that has changed over time. Then explain how cultural relativism might impede attempts to have international agreements on practices such as genocide or child labor. And finally, compare artifacts, sociofacts, and mentefacts. And that's it. Have a great day. Bye.